40 million naira is the bid. Looking for 42. Do I hear 42 million naira? 42 million naira. Going once, 65 million naira, 45 million naira. Going once, going twice. Sold!
They say that when you build an empire, the first brick is the hardest to lay, but the last brick is the one that tells the truth about the whole building. Michael Okafor once walked into rooms ordinary people only dreamed of entering. Bank managers stood when he arrived. Politicians invited him to private dinners. Newspapers called him a visionary entrepreneur. But on a humid Tuesday morning, Michael sat quietly at the back of a crowded auction hall, watching strangers prepare to bid on the last thing he still owned, his headquarters. The same glass walls that once reflected his success, the same building he had used as collateral for a loan he could no longer repay. 3 years earlier, Michael believed he had everything: the company, the reputation, the wealth, the woman he wanted. Today he sat alone, watching it all disappear into a stranger's highest bid. Then the room went quiet. A black SUV pulled into the compound outside. The rear door opened. A woman stepped out, their young son beside her. Ngozi, his ex-wife. The moment Michael saw them, fear gripped his chest, because deep down he already knew why she had come, and he knew there was nothing he could do to stop it. To understand how everything collapsed, we have to go back. Back to before the suits, before the wealth, before Stella. Back to when Michael was simply a struggling bus driver, and Ngozi was simply a trader nobody outside Enugu had heard of yet. Ngozi grew up helping her mother sell fabric at Ogbete Market. Her father died when she was 12, and there was no inheritance waiting for her. In her custom, land passes to sons, not daughters, no matter how hard those daughters work. Her brothers took what little there was and offered her advice instead. "Marry well," they said. "That is your inheritance." She did not listen. By 16, she was trading fabric on credit, paying back every kobo on time, until traders twice her age trusted her word over a written contract. By her early 20s, she had saved enough to do something no woman in her family had ever done. She bought land, with her own money, in her own name. Her uncles called it a disgrace, a woman behaving like a man. Ngozi told them, a woman with land bows to nobody's mercy. That land became collateral for one small warehouse off the Enugu-Onitsha expressway. That warehouse grew into Crown Logistics and Fabrics. She learned customs paperwork the hard way and remembered every officer's name until those same officers started waving her trucks through before they even reached the gate. Within a few years, her name alone was worth more in that market than most company seals. One morning, a contractor failed to show up for an urgent shipment. Customers were waiting, workers stood idle. After exhausting every option, Ngozi called around for emergency transport. That was how she first met Michael. The vehicle that pulled up looked like it had survived several lifetimes. Faded paint, a rattling body, an engine that sounded like it was arguing with death itself. It was the kind of vehicle people called a break-and-quench, a wreck whose bad brakes and overheating engine meant the driver had to keep pouring water on it just to keep moving. Ngozi nearly turned it away. She doubted her goods would ever arrive in one piece. They did, not because the vehicle held together, but because the driver refused to let it fall apart. He stopped again and again to nurse the engine back to life, and somehow still made the delivery on time. A few weeks later, she saw him again, this time hauling passengers at a motor park. The old bus jerked, coughed, and died in the middle of the road. Passengers shouted, some demanded refunds, others laughed at him openly. Michael climbed down, grease on his hands, sweat through his shirt, and went straight to work without arguing with a single person. 10 minutes later, the engine poured. He climbed back behind the wheel and finished the journey like nothing had happened. Most people saw a poor driver and a dying bus. Ngozi saw a man who simply refused to quit. She began requesting him for her own deliveries. Once a week became most days. They talked while goods were loaded, about his mother in Nsukka, about her business, about the kind of future neither of them had been handed. One evening, Ngozi found him bent over a worn notebook by lamplight, scribbling route calculations and fuel costs, sketching a fleet that existed nowhere except in his head. He looked embarrassed when she asked about it, the way a man looks when someone catches him dreaming above his station. He told her the truth anyway. He did not want to drive other men's buses for the rest of his life. He wanted to own a fleet of his own. Ngozi did not laugh the way most people in his life had. She simply nodded, the way a person nods at a plan they recognize as real. It took months, not one evening, for whatever was growing between them to settle into something neither needed to name out loud. He kept showing up reliable, even when his bus refused to. She kept noticing. When Michael eventually asked to court her properly, it surprised no one who had watched them work side by side for the better part of a year.
Ngozi sold the only parcel she had ever owned, the same one her uncles had cursed her for buying in the first place. Her family called her foolish a second time, betting on a man with nothing but a dying bus to his name. She used the proceeds to expand the fleet and brought Michael into the business in a junior role at first, learning routes and manifests alongside staff who had worked for her for years. It took him over a year of proving himself before anyone, Ngozi included, called him a partner. They married quietly not long after. No lavish haul, just two people who had already tested whether they could build something together before they ever signed a certificate. Their son came a few years into the marriage, once the business itself had stopped demanding every waking hour. She taught him everything: how to read a manifest, how to negotiate without insulting a man into raising his price out of spite, which officers respected punctuality over money under the table. But the real engine of Crown Logistics was never something she could hand over in a single conversation. It lived in relationships she had spent a decade building. Vendors who extended her credit because her word had never failed them. Officers who trusted history nobody could simply inherit by marriage. The company grew faster than either of them expected. New contracts, new warehouses, an office in Victoria Island that made bankers return calls within the hour instead of days. Slowly, without either of them deciding it out loud, Michael became the face people saw first. He shook hands at trade dinners, he gave interviews. A magazine ran a feature calling him a rising star of logistics from the East, and never once mentioned her name. Ngozi read it twice at her desk, said nothing, and went back to a shipment that needed her signature before 5. While Michael collected the praise, she was still quietly patching the holes nobody else even knew existed. A supplier threatening to pull out, a customs delay, a credit line about to collapse, problem after problem solved before it ever reached him. A man who hears himself called a visionary often enough, in rooms full of people he once envied, eventually starts believing the title belongs to him alone. At a business dinner in Lagos, a fellow entrepreneur laughed over drinks. "Brother," he said, "success changes everything. You can't build an empire and still think like a poor man." Nobody at the table mentioned Michael's marriage. Nobody needed to. The words stayed with him long after the night ended.
It was around that time he met Stella, a corporate communications consultant, polished and at ease in rooms Michael was still quietly learning to mentor. Their first real conversation came after a leadership conference. As they walked toward the parking area, she asked him simply, "So, what's it like building something this successful?" For the first time in his life, Michael answered that question without mentioning Ngozi. It seemed harmless, a small detail, but it told the truth about how much had already shifted inside him. From there, the professional contact with Stella became personal. Michael told himself it was nothing serious, just a friendship, just someone who understood the world he was now living in. But the friendship changed him in ways he did not notice, or perhaps did not want to notice. A man who begins to be ashamed of his roots will eventually find his branches have nothing to hold on to. He began coming home later, not dramatically late, just late enough that dinner was always cold and their son was already in bed by the time the gate opened. He began correcting Ngozi in front of people, small things at first, the way she laughed too freely at a table full of executives, the way she reached across a plate without thinking, the pigeon that slipped out of her when she was excited. He never corrected her directly. That would have required a conversation. Instead, he went quiet when she spoke at events, a particular kind of silence that does not go unnoticed by a woman who had spent years reading rooms for a living.
One evening they attended a dinner with 3 of his new business associates and their wives. On the drive home, Michael said nothing for a long time. Then he told her, almost casually, that she did not have to come to these things if she found them uncomfortable. Ngozi turned to look at him in the dark of the car. She asked quietly whether she had embarrassed him. He said no. He said he was only thinking about her comfort. She said nothing more, but she knew the difference between a man protecting his wife and a man managing his image. At home, the distance grew in the quiet, invisible ways that are harder to describe than a single argument. Separate conversations, separate silences, 2 people moving through the same house like they were both guests in it, careful not to disturb each other. She raised it with him once, directly, the way she had always handled difficult things. She told him something between them had shifted and asked him plainly to tell her the truth. Michael said he was under pressure from the business, that she was reading too much into nothing, that everything was fine. Ngozi let it rest. She went back to work the next morning and quietly resolved 2 supplier disputes before noon, the same as every other morning. But she had heard the pause before his answer, and she had been in business long enough to know that a man who tells you everything is fine is often the last person who believes it. It was their son who eventually forced the silence to break. On a Saturday morning, the boy asked his father why he never ate breakfast with them anymore. Michael had no answer that was fit for a child. He left the table, walked out to the veranda, and stood there looking at nothing for a long time. That evening, Ngozi sat across from him and asked him plainly whether there was someone else. Michael did not deny it. He spoke about growth, about 2 people moving in different directions, about a marriage that had run its course. Beneath every careful word sat a truth neither of them said aloud. He had become ashamed of where he came from, and she was the most honest reminder of it left in his life. The divorce was finalized months later. Michael kept the company, the headquarters, his name on the building. 6 months after, he married Stella in a ceremony 3 different blogs covered with admiring captions about Lagos's newest golden couple. Ngozi did not curse him at any gate. She packed quietly, took their son, and left the office she had built from 1 bag of fabric and a bus that needed quenching every few kilometers. She did not take the furniture. She did not take the awards. She took something far more valuable: the trust of the vendors, the memory of the officers, the unwritten contracts of respect that had kept the company moving for years. And she did not even announce it, because she barely understood its full weight herself.
For the first 7 months, nothing seemed to change on the surface. Then, almost exactly 7 months after she walked out, the first crack appeared. A shipment sat at the port for 3 extra days because the officer on duty had no history with Michael and demanded the full process. A vendor of 5 years suddenly wanted full payment up front, no explanation given. Michael called it bad luck. He had no idea he was watching years of unwritten trust collapse, one quiet disappointment at a time. He hired consultants who understood spreadsheets and nothing about the relationships behind them. Contracts fell through. Trucks sat idle, waiting on clearance that never came on schedule anymore. Clients drifted to competitors who could still deliver on time. At home, Stella grew frustrated. This was not the future she had married into. The arguments grew more frequent, the distance between them wider. By the 3rd year, desperate to stop the bleeding, Michael took a major loan from the bank and put the headquarters up as collateral, certain the company would recover the way it always had before. It never did. Repayments became difficult, then impossible. One morning, the bank delivered the word he had been dreading: default. Soon after came the second notice: foreclosure. The building would be seized and sold.
A few weeks later, Stella packed her things and left, the same quiet way she had arrived. No confrontation, no goodbye worth remembering. When the door closed behind her, Michael sat alone in a house that suddenly felt far too large and finally understood what he had actually lost, far too late to undo any of it. The news of the auction reached Ngozi by accident, mentioned in passing by an old business associate. She said nothing at first, only thanked him and went on with her day.
That night, after her son had gone to bed, she sat alone thinking about the building, the land she had sold to build it, the years poured into it, the risks nobody else had carried. She made her decision without anger, without revenge, without needing to prove anything to anyone. That building belonged to her story long before any name was ever painted on its gate, and she was not prepared to watch it disappear into a stranger's hands. On the morning of the auction, Ngozi dressed simply, the way she always had. No labels, no attempt to impress a room. Her son walked in beside her. As they entered the hall, conversation slowed. Heads turned. Someone whispered her name. Michael watched her cross the room, place her bid, and raise her hand again when a stranger tried to outbid her. When the gavel finally fell, the headquarters belonged to Ngozi, the same way it always should have.
Workmen repainted the sign above the entrance days later, her name finally standing alone where it had always belonged. Michael drove past one evening on his way to nowhere in particular, saw the lights on inside, full of the kind of energy the building hadn't held in years, and did not go in. Some empires fall because of bad luck nobody could have predicted. This one fell because someone forgot, somewhere along the way, whose hands were actually holding it up the entire time. If you have ever built something for someone and watched them forget your hand was ever there, tell us in the comments below. Subscribe to Life Stories with the Innocent for more stories like Ngozi's.